Okay, so I'm actually going to show how I go about putting hair on my Space Marines, so it works for her and anything, quite frankly. Now, I've chosen this head here because he's nice and bald. Although he does have a skull plate, I am actually going to cover that over with some of the hair. The idea with the hair I'm making today is it's basically going to be kind of like an kind of outgrowing hair, so not fully grown out yet. These are basically my Night Lords who are starting to become basically on the verge of becoming Renegade Marines. So what I've got some modelling putty made up, just some green stuff, the 2-part green stuff, and I'm going to start off by just basically putting it on his head straight, so it basically looks like a very simple beret. Now what I do from here is dead simple. I just get a scalpel and I start kind of, first of all I decide where his parting's going to be. So I'm basically going to make it so that he's got a slight, so it's not perfectly centre, and then I'm just going to start gently scoring into it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just keeping a very straight hair to begin with. And then as I get kind of around to the front, start pulling that downwards. Okay, and so far I've got some very straight hair developing. Now, if I don't want it to be nice and straight, that's when I can kind of just start kind of scoring into it in different directions. And it starts to give the impression of a bit more mess, which is actually the look I'm going for right now, is actually quite a messy. What you got to consider as well is that because of the way that Space Marines have their heads shaved and then implants put in, it's potentially going to mess up the way that hair can grow on them. So it's really an aesthetic choice about whether or not you cover the implants or kind of have the hair growing around it. Now, my personal preference is actually to have the hair grow around it, and that really does add to that kind of look that different parts of them just aren't going to be perfectly balanced. Now I will need to put a little bit of hair in that point there, so I'm going to take a bit of my off-cut green stuff. This time I'm just going to very gently push it down here, and I'm just going to kind of stipple it in now. And then I'm going to try and work it upwards. And so what we've got there is where the implant is, it's affecting his hair's ability to grow properly. And that feels a lot more sort of natural. Now, as I said, these are going to be Night Lords, so I try and think about how the Night Haunter model looks, and he is very, very careless and unkempt, unlike the kind of Raven Guard whose hair will be kind of emo and put over to one side in partings. I imagine them having a lot more straight hair than, say, a Night Lord might have, who will probably have like slightly wavy black hair. Now I'm going to start heading this way, and again, because these are gangers, you don't even need to worry about having, you know, hair that's even balanced either side. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could even just completely have it shaven on one side and coming down on the other, but that's kind of a personal preference thing. But what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of following basically the flow of the bodywork here, of this head shape, as best I can. Now, if you really wanted to go and have full-blown long hair, it's probably best to actually get it on the, glue this head onto the miniature to begin with. Now, what we're starting to get here on this side is we're starting to get a kind of bum shape around about here, and that's because, if I show you, he has actually got a metal plate in his head. So look at that, his hair's caught in the wind now. So it's deciding what to do with this now. Now, do I keep on pushing it over, or do I want to kind of split it out a bit? Now, what I am going to do is I'm just going to shorten it now. A bit like one of those, but like one of those old Play-Doh heads where you push it down and all of the stuff squeezes out of it. Yep. You can see now I've got quite a reasonable head of hair coming along, but again, I still feel that you should almost feel like, although they don't really care about particularly good haircuts or anything like that, they're still soldiers, and they still probably appreciate that it's not a good idea for hair just to kind of fall into the wrong places. But I start to feel that that is definitely how I want him to start looking now. As I said, he's got a metal plate in his head here, and there's not much I can do about that unless I completely have it cut away. And as I said, that's pretty fine in a lot of ways, because you want that kind of personal style hair. Now, if I want to kind of move something around now without scratching or scraping it, I'm going to start using this. So this tool here, I'm just going to try and get the hair digging in a bit. You can see how I'm kind of pushing the hair now rather than making new hair. Yeah, so he's got a kind of build up over this way. I still think I could have improved this a little bit, but I think overall it's starting to develop a shape that I'm kind of happy with. Because one thing you've always got to remember as well is when a miniature is this close to the camera, it's going to show up a lot more sort of minor faults than people looking at it a bit further away. But overall, it's looking good. See, you can see on that bit there right at the front, it just looks too clumped together. So I'm just going to try and separate that out a bit so it looks more like individual hairs. There we go. I'm going to keep pushing that downwards, just trying to flatten that lump out now so it's just want to make sure that I'm clearing that metal plate of any hair, or at least not too much hair. Okay, and as you can see, I've got some hair on this guy now, and as I said, the intention on this was to create mess and a lack of order and no real sort of like, you know, clear plan about how the guy's cut his hair or dealt with it. It's growing long on this side, but obviously due to his implant, he's lacking hairs around the side. Again, I could probably keep pulling that down a bit more if I wanted to, but I think it kind of like makes more sense that it's bunched up against it. And just to show you one that I've done, so I'll probably do a proper tutorial on this in a little bit, but on a different one of my miniatures, I've actually gone all the way. I've actually given him a full set of locks, but obviously in order to do that, it's a good idea to actually build the model completely, make sure the head's on it, so that the hair then kind of flows. So there we go. Dead simple way to do kind of messy, unkempt, slightly gang style hair.